Hello there. This is a brief video on how to import assets and then plug in PBR materials to them. This demo is going to be a little bit Maya specific. So the first thing I want to mention is make sure your assets are in the assets folder and make sure your textures are in the source images. So I have here the asset of a fancy picture frame, and I do have source images and I do have the textures in them. Typically I would want to name this just so I can keep things organized. Now I have Maya open. I'm going to go to File and then Import, and then I'm going to go into the Assets folder, then import that frame. Next, something that is a very good practice to do. I will select the frame. Obviously we have here two different assets, the frame itself and the painting. So here's how I do this. It's kind of really minor, but it's a very, very useful practice. I select one of them, right mouse button, assign favorite material, standard surface. Then right away, I would click on the painting and hit G. G redoes the last command that you apply. Command is something like extrude or bevel or applying new material. So G. Next, what I want to do is to go here into the tab where I have the materials for it. I'm going to name this frame MTL material. So now I'm going to click on the frame, go to color, and then I'm going to go to file, go to the directory here, and I'm going to go inside the correct folder for the textures. This is the canvas diffuse. I'm looking for frame diffuse. And as you can see here, the naming convention is very important because it tells you exactly if you're clicking on diffuse or roughness whatsoever. And keep in mind that an additional importance of the suffixes that we have in the naming convention is that in some cases, certain files do not really show here on the preview if they are like heavy or if they're like formats such as HDR, for instance, it doesn't show. So that's another reason to keep things named properly. So I'm gonna click here and add it. You want to make sure you click 6 on the keyboard in Maya, otherwise it doesn't show you the texture by default. Now I'm gonna continue by doing the same process. Basically I'm gonna go map by map, meaning the diffuse for this and the diffuse for the canvas. So I'm gonna click here, file, click on the folder directory, go inside here, and then canvas diffuse. Enter, and now I have it. So notice how they're all kind of they have this really high specular, and that's really the reason why we use PBR maps, because then we can have a map that would tell the computer renderer which areas are reflective, which areas are rough, which areas are glossy, which areas are possibly emissive or transparent, and so on and so forth. So going into the frame, now what I want to have here is to plug in the PBR maps. So I have diffuse and I have normal maps and roughness. So for this demo, to really keep it simple, I'm just going to use the roughness. No need for the normal maps for now, even though the normal maps would make a huge aesthetic difference for something like a painting, right? So roughness. So select here on the canvas, and this is the roughness. So go click here on the checker, then click on the directory, and then roughness. The roughness, as you can see here, it's kind of grayscale, and it's going to tell the computer which areas are supposed to be rough. So enter, and now you see it has a different specular feeling. But wait, there is more. I'm gonna go to the Hypershade. One thing you always need to do is to set the maps to the proper color space. So if you are selecting the canvas, you go here into graph material unselected. That's going to show me the network here. For some reason, it's always messy by default. Okay, so here's the texture. I'm going to keep it to sRGB because that's going to guarantee the best result for a texture. But for roughness, it's grayscale. I don't want it to be edited. So I'm going to click here, utility and raw. So now it's not going to edit it, and that's going to guarantee the most accurate result out of that map. So I'm going to do the same here with the frame. Click on the frame, go to the roughness, file, directory, textures, and then I want to have frame roughness. So now, as you can see, it has a lot more restriction on that overall kind of specular that it had. Lastly, I want to mention two important things. The first one is showing you the result between before and after applying those PBR maps of roughness. Even though it's solely just roughness, notice here the difference. I have the before on the right side and after on the left side. So this is after applying the roughness and this is before. It looks washed out. It looks like a kind of a fake print, meaning not really on canvas, just kind of on paper and really plain kind of ink, as opposed to printing with or painting with actual material. So this is before and after. There's some zooming in here. The most important part of applying those PBR textures is not necessarily always to find the most pleasing result, but rather the most supposedly accurate result that reflects on the attributes of the material in real life. So that is the first thing that I want to mention. The other one is related to the Hypershade and how we can connect the materials with the maps. In the Hypershade, I have the material for the painting, which is the canvas here, okay? And I want to connect to it a texture and a roughness map. The fastest and best way that I like to use is by clicking on the main material, then with middle mouse button, drag that node that has the texture on it, loaded, and then drop it into the color of that base material. And that's going to connect it. But notice that it automatically plugs in from the color instead of the alpha, because the color is what we really care about. And that is one of the automatic things that Maya knows how to do. Similarly, when I select that material here, the main material, I go into the map that has the roughness on it. Notice how this time it's going to connect the alpha, because in Maya, the alpha works just fine for a map that is expected to have grayscale. So select the main material and then grab with middle mouse button that node that has the roughness map, grab it into the roughness. Notice how it connects the alpha. Now, if you have the urge for some reason to connect the color, it doesn't really make sense, because at best it does the same result but with a longer time. But if you really need to do so, it's important to also know how to do that manually. You select on that connection, click delete, and then if you go into the out color and try to plug it, notice how it's kind of gray. It doesn't do it for you, right? And it gives you an error. Instead, you need to open that plus and go with the R. But why waste time? Just instead of making the same connection that gives you the same result, instead I would just delete this and just simply select the material, middle mouse button, drag and drop into the roughness, and that's it. So that's how it's done. Now another thing I want to throw in here, let's say you want to disconnect the connection between the main material and these maps. You can simply select on these arrows and delete, and then it gets disconnected. So what if you don't have access to these, or what if you have a really complicated network and you want to have a simpler or a different solution? You go into the material, right mouse button on whatever you want to break, and then break connection. Right mouse button, break connection. All right, my friends, I hope this video was helpful, and I am going to leave the link for this asset from polyhaven.com in the description so you can practice along with me. All right, thanks.